Very good. Thank you. I'll call to order the April 15th, 2024 meeting for the Economic Development Committee. The time is 6:00, we'll call it 8. We do have about 50 minutes to go through before we have to move into our committee of the whole meeting at 7 p.m. Do thank everybody for being here, and note that all committee members are here, which is myself, Steve Solander, and Beth Ackerman. Note that all council members and many of the members of the administration are here as well. Folks, we've got a full agenda for this evening, so we want to go ahead and proceed right into the agenda. Again, if there is time at the end of the meeting for any questions from either the audience or members of council, we'll take those at that time, with council the first precedence, and members of the audience after that, if time allows. If not, so people know, this will be presented on the committee of the whole agenda and brought forward for a vote. So there will be 2 more public opportunities for the comment period to take place on that. With that, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mazur to kind of take us through. Mr. Mazur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the town center update. What I was going to do to start with is kind of talk high level, get a little background, and give an update on what happened with the previous developer too. So I'll start with that. Why we officially did terminate the contract with that was the previous development agreement with Fairmount Properties. We did that amicably. They really, from the very beginning, they specialize in medical office buildings and educational institutions as being a part of their developments. And in this case, they had the Mercy Hospital right next door to this site. For a long time, they were trying to work out a deal with them to develop the back half of that land as a medical office building. Well, COVID happened, and the dynamics of the medical industry and the investments that they had been making had changed. So you saw the ProMedica, Mercy, and other hospital systems really clam up on the amount of investments they made in all over the place in every community throughout Ohio and everywhere else. So they really stopped making investments, and I think that they were really banking on that medical office building addition as being a part of the development. So when Mercy or whoever else that they were talking to backed out, and the timing of it just kind of dragging on, they realized that we all realized that this had been going on far too long. So at a certain point, we had the discussion, very upfront, frank discussion about whether or not this is going to happen in the timeline that we're expecting as a community. And the reality was it wasn't going to. So we parted ways amicably. We did terminate that agreement. And we have a new partner that we were working with and talking to. Mike Denman is here from River Rock Property Group. And Mike is, and River Rock is a more local developer. I believe you're based out of Sylvania, is that correct? Toledo area. And has a proven track record, has done local projects as well as projects that are further away, but it's somebody local, understands the area. I think that's really important. But I won't get into that too much. I'll ask Mike, ask you to come up and introduce yourself after I go through the meat and potatoes of the development agreement, though. After the meat. So I was going to go through the development agreement a little bit, though. This is some of the details. And again, this is some of the background. The concept in the very beginning was to establish a TIF district and use TIF funds and TIF revenues to help support the development of that site into something that we would all like to see, something a little more than just your normal run-of-the-mill fast food restaurants and strip malls. So the TIF compensation agreement was developed with the schools. We do have, if you look on the map, there's an orange area that says existing TIF at the bottom. So that TIF has already been created. This map does need to be updated. We actually did create another 2-parcel TIF. That's where the S&G gas station is and the Whitewater Car Wash. That's a 2-parcel TIF. And what's in red towards the bottom is the residential TIF district that's in the process of being created. Right now, we're waiting on groundbreaking, and then we'll get the residential TIF district before city council before the end of this year. And then the rest of the green and the yellow area is the aggregate area that we talk about. That's part of the school compensation agreement, where we can eventually, what we plan on doing is creating that whole area as one separate TIF district. So just so everybody knows, just kind of a rehash. A TIF district, TIF stands for tax increment financing. So so the taxes are taxed at a certain rate right now, but when there's an improvement on that parcel, that increased tax amount is what generates the TIF revenue. So that increase in taxes that are collected actually would come back to the city to be used for infrastructure development. It can be used for land purchases. It can be used for pay down of debt that has to do with public improvements. So that was the plan all along, was to generate enough TIF revenues to help support the project to get something that's more desirable than, like I mentioned before, what normally we see on Navarre Avenue. So, but what it really does too is it gets the city the highest and best use of that property. I think that's really important because that ultimately is what generates more property taxes in the end. The agreement that you have in your packets is a refinement of the previous agreement. We did narrow up the guardrails on this to help benefit us. We do have a little bit of some performance measures in here. And some of the details of the terms are this, and I'll just go through these. The land purchase. So that section 1A, right in the very beginning, the city eventually, once the developer has met some requirements, the city would purchase the land when the developer secures a tenant and financing and is prepared to start their development. Then a portion or all of the land would be transferred to the developer. And that's the city's decision on how that transacts. So it could be in whole or in part. I know we talked about, if you look at the, I'll call it the right edge of the yellow box, we had talked about building a road that would be right next to Culver's. And at this point in this agreement, no road construction is required. So we do actually have a bond issuance that was taken out a few years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, Nick, but we do have some money remaining in an account for that road to be constructed all the way through. Talking with the developer, that road is a public road, is not needed, and the developer would be free to provide a public access drive as part of the private improvements on the property. And then the last item has to do with the development of some kind of park space or public space. And that is optional for the city. That's optional for us. It's not a requirement, but we do have an amount set in here for that. What that looks like in the shape of that, it's difficult to say right now because, and I'm hoping Mike can help me out with this, but when you're dealing with retail developments, a lot of times the tenant base will have a large part in shaping the site. So it depends on what tenants come in, who's attracted to the site, and then what we wind up getting that will help shape the site. But we do have an allotment in this for ourselves to be TIF paid for from TIF revenues for a public space here. And that was my understanding, and, everybody's been through this, but we've always talked about moving our farmers markets down there and having other public events down there to be able to program whether it's through the city or through other organizations. So those are the four main points. The rest of the agreement is largely the same. But there are some restrictions in here too, when you get into the details about what can and actually what can't be developed, prohibited uses section on what can't be developed on the site. And I'll hit the pause button there and ask Mike to come up and introduce himself, talk about some of the projects and what expectations that we all have. Thanks.
Thank you,
Mike.
Joel.
Not made really for tall people. Huh? Like Joel said, my name is Mike Denman. I am a principal at River Rock Properties Group. I thank you for your time and letting us come up here. I thought maybe what the best thing to do is come up and let you guys ask questions to me about specific things. We could talk for hours about potential tenants and all that kind of stuff. I think the one thing that you should all understand is that you have a very nice developable piece of real estate property. Okay. I will bring up the French Quarter Square. We were the developers on French Quarter Square. I've basically been in the Toledo, Ohio area for about 35 years, raised my family here. And what we try to do in River Rock is we're not very big. There's only about 3 of us. We subcontract a lot of our, accounting, leasing, that kind of stuff. I run the day-to-day operations for the leasing. And this project fits perfectly in our wheelhouse. This is a 10-acre site off of a very nice interstate on a well-traveled Navarre Avenue. And so for us, we are very excited to be here. We really like the site, and we would love to be able to come into an agreement with you. And so for that, I think I maybe just ask you if you wanted to ask me questions about our process and stuff like that. I would love to answer that for you, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
perfect.
Committee members or council members? You got to wave at me. I can't always see the lights.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Ackerman.
I'm sorry. I'm new to this. These guys are veterans, most of them through this process. And part of me wants to get really excited, like, yay. And they're all looking at me like, don't get too worked up. But I mean, I think we're both fairly new. I'm familiar with the Bosselman name from decades of his father. I'm almost 60. So when I heard Bosselman, I went, oh, okay. I know that name. And I'm obviously familiar with what's going on in the French Quarter. So I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier to meet you, but do I dare get enthusiastic and excited about this? Or should I stay apprehensive?
I think
Give me
what
a
I-
pep talk.
Yeah, well, first of all, I did want to apologize. My partner, Bill, will be here. We had a small glitch with our tax filing through our accountant, so he had to go sign some things, and so he will be here, I promise. He's on his way. I guess I can't answer for how you should feel, but I'm excited. So, yes, I think you should be very excited. I think that we have some challenges. There's an old saying in real estate that time kills all deals, and this has been out there for a long time. And so we need to get over some of those hurdles. But again, I think it comes back to the point of you have an A+ piece of property on a very nice artery in Northwest Ohio that we will absolutely have interest in this property.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Slander.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to say I'm excited. So I'm glad. It's really nice to see a local company over here working with us on this, because I think you know how our area is. And I've watched that French Quarter grow very nicely and doing very well. So I'm very excited. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Slander. Other council members, any comments, questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Drake.
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming. I know you can't get into details. I understand that. Do you have a ballpark figure on how soon you hope to get going on it? Because that's anywhere I go in Oregon, that's the #1 question. people ask, not just me, but I guarantee all of us,
Sure.
just a ballpark.
Yeah, so I think I guess I'd ask you to define that question. What does get going mean? I mean, are you talking about putting a shovel in the ground, permitting stages? So let me just kind of go through the process, right? We need a couple months to identify the tenants and who we think would be there. Then we would like the administration's approval on the tenants that we think can go to the area. From then, we probably need a couple more months to sign leases. And then from there, you need a couple months to do drawings. And then from there, I'm assuming site plan approvals. And a lot of this can be going on simultaneously. But I mean, you're probably in a real good, fast moving is probably end of this year. We could hopefully get a shovel in the ground. I would tell you our intent is that we better know by summer who our tenants are, or we're probably going a different direction. So I think for planning, I would tell you that we would hope to have somebody open summer to end of 2025. If it went the way, and I'll use French Quarter, it won't be the whole thing, right? You'll get a couple tenants, national tenants up front. We'll get them in there. We really need somebody to get us going, to legitimize the project, because I have not reached out specifically to tenants yet, just because it's not really my right to do that. I'm not under contract, but I have had people call me. And I think the challenge and the hurdle that we have is it's been sitting there for 4 or 5 years. I do agree with Joel 100%. I think the other developer was trying to do some type of medical office type of play, with a mixed use. And that, as you all know, with the health systems, that is all, you can read the blade and find out that that's not been gone well since COVID. And so our plan would be to get this out there immediately. We actually have a very large show in Las Vegas in the next month. So this timing is actually perfect. 95% of the retailers/users will be there. I will plan on meeting with all of them. And so, so I would think that we would hopefully have somebody open by the end of summer 2025, rough plus or minus.
Okay, and I got one more follow-up. I'm sorry.
Sure, go right ahead.
I'm not in the industry, you are, so I trust you. Does your industry, once a company says they want to come here, a restaurant or whatever it's going to be, do they sign an agreement, correct?
So typically the way it goes is we would get what's considered a letter of intent. It's called an LOI from a real estate, from the tenant. And then that truly is not binding. It's really not worth the piece of paper it's written on. From there, we go into lease negotiations. But most of the national tenants will not be sending us signed LOIs on their letterhead if they're not interested in coming. And so, no, a letter of intent is not binding. A lease is. And so we will know we have a deal when we have a signed lease and not a day before. I've been at closings where we're waiting for the other people to sign the docs and they don't show.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does your business, once you do know it's a done deal, they're coming, do you guys put a sign up
No.
that eventually says coming soon if they're really not?
No, we will never put a sign up. We let that up to the tenant. We get ourselves in a lot of trouble mentioning tenant's name if they haven't told us we can do that. So I would probably talk to the mayor and Joel about the specific tenants, or maybe you, but it's certainly a confidentiality. We will never make an announcement. They do.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr.
Thank you,
President,
Mr. Drake. Ms. Pollitt.
first of all, I'm pleased that we're moving forward with someone new, and we are looking forward to working with you. From my seat, I can only speak for me. I promise you, I'm going to give you the patience you need to get this done right. I'm not going to sit there and ask you every week who's coming, who's coming, who's coming. I am going to honor your work, and I'm going to trust that you are going to do what's right for Oregon. I just wanted to say thank you and welcome, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pollitt. Any other members? I have a question of my own, Mr. Denman, and again, I'll echo some of the same sentiments. I'm very excited. Had the opportunity to talk some time ago, and I'll say start putting the wheels in motion. Think we're at the right place at the right time. I think the opportunity is before us. So you mentioned the opportunity to help move things along quickly as things happen. Obviously, you're a business person. The faster these things happen, the faster revenue starts producing itself to you. As a city and as a council and as a building department, how do we best help you to facilitate moving quickly, but yet responsibly and smartly?
Yeah, and so I think what I'd have to do is let you guys know that on a item by item process, right? I can't tell you that. I mean, the big thing for us will be site plan approval. I'm not sure what your policy is about that. I mean, I know you guys have architectural review. I know you, so getting through those, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't know that process of yours yet, but I would certainly be in touch with Joel and the mayor, about how we can, or you, and how we can expedite that if it needs to be.
Fair enough. Thank you. Other members, any questions?
Mr. Horniak.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you move forward, as you talk about building and zoning site plans and stuff, I would encourage us as a city to make sure that we are ready to expedite any agreement or any building and zoning approvals that the developer needs, and not waste time. We need to, if he needs something done, we should be able to, in a short span, be able to get his questions answered, get his permits in place, and get moving on the project. And we as a city should make sure that we provide everything he needs on an expedited manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Well said.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. Can't thank you enough for being here tonight, and would like to welcome you. And like Mr. Wallenczak just said, if there's anything, or like everybody has said, if there's anything that we can do to help expedite or to move things faster or get things going, please do not hesitate to ask. So thank you so much.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Any other members? Joel, anything to wrap up with Mr. Dunn?
No, I think you mentioned it. We do have an architectural, this is in an overlay district, so we do have an architectural review committee. Our turnaround times, and Mike knows this, our turnaround times for plan reviews are very quick, and communication early and often with whoever does your design is really helpful. So we'll work with them every step of the way.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Mr. Dunn, we're very excited to have you here. We appreciate you being out here tonight to kind of share an overview and an idea of where we go. Obviously, we've got the development agreement, which will be first discussion this evening. Move for vote through next week's meeting, assuming it gets forwarded to the agenda. And I think once we have that in place, then I think we start making plans. We start talking about what comes next. So we're very excited to have you here. Looking forward to seeing the project that you'll put together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. That said, if anybody didn't notice, if you got the agenda, we did a little moving around. So my apologies for not announcing that before we started. However, we are going to shift back into the property maintenance code. And there's been a lot of discussion through committees over the last year about this discussion. It was first presented a few years ago, didn't quite take traction at that time. So we've been looking at considering discussing a property maintenance code for the city of Oregon. And Mr. Mazur, are we starting with you or are we going to Mr. Schrake?
We can go right to Mr. Strake.
All right.
actually.
We'll go to Mr. Schrake.
Mr. President,
Mhm.
so one of the biggest concerns for the city is how we deal with blighted property and how we can expedite getting those blighted properties taken care of. The property maintenance code typically is a tool that many municipalities use to do that. What we have done is a little bit of research on the communities around us. And the communities that have adopted the International Code Council's property maintenance code, which has been vetted and utilized throughout the nation, is Sylvania, Maumee, Toledo, Napoleon, and Dublin. Some of the other municipalities, smaller municipalities, have tried to craft their own in a effort to just address individual concerns as they arise. But some of them have chosen to later abandon that and go with what is the International Code Committee's recommendations. So what we're looking at is the International Property Maintenance Code, the 2021 edition, which coincides with the new building codes that have been adopted by the state of Ohio. Interesting enough, the International Code Council is the author for the building code, the mechanical code, the plumbing code, et cetera, that the state of Ohio has adopted. So they are not foreign to the code process. It is just another method that has already been vetted nationally in legal forms, as well as it interfaces with those building codes and mechanical, plumbing, and electrical codes because it's all published by the same entity. A little background, the International Code Council was formed as a conglomeration or a merger of the 4 building code entities that the United States was under. So there was a point where it was difficult for people to cross state lines and they weren't sure which code they were following. And so the 4 building code entities merged and created the International Code Council. Do not be confused by the term international. It is purely built and created here in the United States. I believe that their reason by using the term international is in hopes that other countries would adopt our best practices for code compliance. With that, I would recommend that we adopt the ICC International Property Maintenance Code with our own amendments. Our own amendments, typically with the same as all the other cities that have adopted it, are just aligning it with the Ohio code. So wherever there is a reference within the ICC International Property Maintenance Code that refers to the International Building Code, we have to amend it to reference the Ohio Building Code because that is the adopted code of the land in Ohio. So you will find in what I have provided all of those amendments throughout that realign with Ohio's laws and codes. The one thing that I would like to bring everyone's attention to is 1335.01, general scope and intent. So the intent here is to establish what the property maintenance code is to be used as. Again, it is to address blight. It is to address public nuisance. And it is not to go after a little bit of peeling paint here, a broken window here, and where somebody is in the process of fixing it or such. That is not the intent. The intent is not to put neighbors against neighbors and so forth. It is totally intended to address what would rise to being a public nuisance, and then give us the tools to address that in a court of law if necessary. most cases, we are able to gain compliance, about 90%, just by contacting the owner, giving them a notice, and letting them work through what needs to be done to comply. But there is that 10% that tends to drag it out, and we have to have an opportunity to kind of press that and get those taken care of. Because at the end of the day, it attracts additional nuisances. I like to consider it like a cancer, and if you do not address it, it's going to start to affect other properties and spread. What we have found historically is when people start to take care of these blighted properties, then their neighbors start to pay attention and take care of those. And it becomes a snowball in a positive effect. And at the end of the day, the whole neighborhood comes back to life. So we have seen positive outlook in utilizing this tool. I'm welcome to take any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Schrag. And for members of the committee as well as members of council that are here in the administration. So like I said, we've been talking about this for a while. One thing I just want to quickly address for those that don't know, we're utilizing the 2021 version of the code, which is the latest adopted version of the code. For anybody who doesn't know, the residential building code as well as this particular code is updated typically, and it has a 3-year, if you will, grandfather clause before it actually gets implemented and adopted so that communities have time to be prepared for this. Project Underway can do that. So when you're looking at the 21 code, that is the most recent version of this. And considering what this does and can do for us as a community, there's an opportunity for us not only from keeping our city beautiful and well kept, this really gives us an opportunity to try to address those issues from the city side and really just kind of create and raise the benchmark of the opportunity for all of our areas within town. So with that said, any questions, Mr. Mays, or anything directly you want to speak to on that? Members of the committee first, anything to say on this? Ms. Sackerman, go ahead.
I was wondering, Mr. Schrag knows how I feel about HOAs, how they can be wonderful and how they can be awful. But I was wondering, I'm worried about, especially like the elderly or handicapped people that wouldn't either financially or physically be able to come into compliance. Can we have some sort of conflict resolution type thing where we can find out what is the cause of? I mean, I just don't want it to be punitive. I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're doing, but if there are people with hardships, then we can identify that and then we can help them find the necessary means. I just don't want, I've seen people elderly and that they start getting fines and then they compile, and then they're buried and they end up losing everything. And that's just not here, not you guys with this, but I'm just hoping we can have a human touch involved with trying to understand if people are in dire straits or they have health concerns why they can't achieve it, and maybe, I don't know, come up with a like a conflict resolution before we resort to, something litigious. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sackerman. And I'll speak to that briefly if you're okay with that, Mr. Schrag. That's been a pretty regular part of our conversations. Now with this, there are some timeline provisions which we think are reasonable to address an item before it gets to a citing or, a fine or anything to that nature. But as with any law or ordinance that we put through, there's also got to be a common sense approach to this. We understand that there are going to be different circumstances in a lot of different cases and working with the property owners to try to develop a resolution. But there is an opportunity for a hearing process as part of this and a direct communication call out to where the members of our administration do have some discretion to be able to apply this smartly, I would use for lack of a better term. But thank you for your comments. Much appreciated. Anybody else? Sure.
Mr. Horniak, if I could.
Ms. Purpura.
Respond to Mrs. Ackerman. In the cases in which individuals are cited into court, I can tell you that it is our policy to work with them. We want compliance. And many times they don't open up to the hardships they have until they get into court. So we have reached out to Boy Scouts, a lot of nonprofits that will actually come and help people. Because at the end of the day, you just want compliance. And it's not until you find out what the hardship is that you can actually help them. But I definitely can say that our zoning department does an amazing job working with people. And when they know that people are willing to work with them, we get compliance. And for that 10%, if they do make it down to court, we're still trying to get compliance. So that is the policy of the city. And when there are those hardships, we do reach out to organizations to help people.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Council members, any other questions? Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Chairman Horniak. Two things. One, is this for residential and commercial? Okay, so this would be, because we had talked previously about rolling out a commercial, then a residential, but this would be combined for both residential and commercial. How is it policed? Is it our building and zoning guys driving around, our crew leaders driving around, or is it like we've historically been, just a complaint-driven community? How are we going to police this if we enact it? There's no sense in enacting it if we're not going to police and enforce it. So how is that going to work?
Mr. President, so yes, this would be handled very similar to any building code item. It is written for both commercial and residential. I would recommend that we don't try to break it apart and split those two. But I would say that historically, we have been complaint-driven based, unless it rises to the level of it's obvious. And I can also say the community has never shied away from filing a complaint if there's an item or issue. And that's a good thing because they care about their community. And so they do want to see things that correspond to how they take care of their properties. And so we would address it accordingly. But we're not at this time, we don't have the manpower to drive up and down the streets looking specifically for these violations because we've also got other tasks required of us, such as building inspections, permits, and so forth. We may, in the future, need to hire another individual to help with that effort. But right now, we have been able to manage based on a complaint basis.
Thank you, Mr. Schrag.
Thank you. And what I worry about is us becoming the arbiter of neighborhood disputes.
And
The person across the fence, and we
I was
already
gonna say,
are, I
unfortunately,
understand that.
we are.
And-
And, part of the discussion with this is that's not something we're trying to, further advance. But by having a code in place, it does give us a framework and a structure to be able to, try to utilize as a basis point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Walzak. Council, I will say that I want to close and move on to the next item because we are getting short on time, and I do want to make sure we talk at least through the next one. Again, we will be bringing that forward over the next several weeks, so there will be more opportunities to ask questions, gain information, and I'd encourage everybody to engage the administration. And Mr. Schrag is very well knowledgeable on this. I also want to thank Mr. Reeves for his work and Mr. Wallensack as we've worked on this, talked through this, and brought this forward to try to get to a usable piece. With that, Mr. Mazur, I want to switch over to you to take us through some of the dialogue on short-term rentals.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've have a number of codes. I think I sent this in one of your weekly updates, but we do have a series of different codes that we're kind of going through right now and updating. The short-term rentals is one of them. And, but basically, I think that there's three main points that we've got to address in here. One of them is registrations. We got to know who has an Airbnb or a Vrbo or whatever it is, one of these short-term rentals. We got to have some kind of a registration. Whether there's a fee to it or not, to me, my opinion is it really doesn't matter. We just got to know where they're at. Number two is there's got to be limitations. We got to have some kind of guardrails in place where it doesn't become, they don't become nuisance properties, or the rentals become raucous, so to speak. So the idea here is to limit not only the number of people that can occupy the residence, but how many vehicles can be parked and where they can be parked. And those are, and so having limits on the number of people and vehicles, and then having limits on the parking. So those would be the three things that I would recommend having in. This can be something, start off not too heavy-handed, but just have something in place. If it does continue to persist or be a problem, then we can always revisit this and look at putting something else in place that's a little more restrictive, or something that would eliminate any issues that may be out there. So that's not much more of an update than that. And unless we hear something different from the committee or other council members, that's the direction we're planning on going in. And we are planning to bring something, a fuller comprehensive ordinance change to city council sometime in May, along with some of these other code changes that we're looking at. So is that a good summary?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Committee members, any questions? Council members, any questions regarding the short-term rentals? And again, I appreciate the administration's work on that, to the points where we again, because we're talking to property maintenance code, there's an opportunity for us to visit this and put some of these in place at the same time. And again, we don't want to over restrict these, but we do want to try to help them be on file with the city, making sure that it's known, we know where the properties are, what they are, and also do some limitations as far as how many people based on the bedrooms in that particular unit, as well as parking spaces that are available there as well, so that we make sure we just have some, I'll say, guidelines of, more than anything, being a good neighbor, being a good business into that area if they're operating in that manner. With that said, anything further on short-term rentals?
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I read through this and I really appreciate the fact that there's no tax for lodging tax that is usually in hotels and stuff like that. So this really is user-friendly. It's just get a permit. We're not taking that right away from you. It's just make sure the city understands it, and then there's a consequence if you don't. So it really is clear cut. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you, everyone. Moving on, we have what I'm going to call the bucket of miscellaneous items. For that, I'll take it over to Mr. Schrake. We've got about a good 6 minutes left to run through some of those items. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Schrake.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. The next item is the accessory buildings, 1155.01. And that is just to clean up some language in there because we do have some conflict where we have agriculture districts that are used as a dwelling. And so how is that then addressed for location of accessory buildings? And I do see that there was a typo to be located in the rear yard. So that would help clarify a little bit for A districts, as well as in Part D. We would there's some confusion as to the way it was previously written, where you cannot have an accessory structure without a main structure unless you are actively building that main structure. That was the intent, but the way it's written indicates without, and that should not be in there. That really should be when the main building is actively under construction. So that at the end of the day, you won't have properties that have an accessory without a primary structure. So it just cleans up a little bit of the language in that section, but doesn't really change how it's been enforced previously. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Ackerman, go ahead, please.
is my understanding, and tell me, I mean, if you or Melissa, Joel, I was always of the impression, like, you have to build a residence and then you can put an outbuilding or accessory building. Did we change that? And I just am not aware.
Mr. President, Ms. Ackerman, that is correct. However, we have given, the code has permitted a little leeway if someone were actively building their primary residence, but they could move forward and get the accessory started because it's simpler construction. So that those two activities could coincide simultaneously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Anything further, Mr. Schrake?
No, Mr. President.
All right. I know that that ties in with a lot of different things, folks. I do want to give an opportunity to have a break before we start the 7 o'clock meeting for
Mr.
members.
Mr.
Yeah.
President, there was one more item that was.
I thought there was
Yeah.
one more. Okay.
I thought you were just talking about the accessory
Okay.
buildings.
Nope.
My apologies. Then the other item is in the works for the latest activity that we've been getting a lot of inquiries, and that is marijuana dispensaries. With the latest legislation that passed by the voters in Ohio. Ohio is still working through the details of that. We have had medical marijuana dispensaries, but now with recreational permitted in Ohio, the state legislature is still trying to work out the rules related to that, and they have not released that. But that hasn't stopped the inquiries that are coming in from all over the country as to what our rules and regulations are related to marijuana dispensaries, and to go even further, cultivation, processing, et cetera. So we have looked at some of the neighboring communities and communities similar to us and how they managed medical marijuana dispensaries. And if you notice, in most of what I've provided, medical is no longer listed because now we are dealing with the recreational sale as well. So there are spacing requirements associated with that typically. There's also operation time, when it can be open and when it must be closed. It also deals with how close it is to where minors are cared for, whether it is schools, preschools, et cetera. Again, distance, separation and distance from those institutions, as well as separation from each other, from one dispensary to another, so that you don't have this whole row of competing dispensaries. We still don't know if the state is going to limit the number per county or such, but many municipalities have already taken the first steps to start to manage and limit that. I've also addressed some of the ways that the marijuana is going to be displayed, any signage and such, which could invite some problems, and so we want to avoid that. I'm open to any questions you might have on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Schrake. In the 2 or so minutes we have, council members, any questions or committee members?
I will reserve my comments at this time.
All right. This, I'm sure, will bring much more dialogue as we go. But again, this is to, I'll say, start the conversation and start the thinking process of what that needed to be. Mayor, did you have something to say?
I was just going to say, I want to commend the council for going forward with the property maintenance code as it was brought up in the past. Recent time, it was brought up 2 other times and it went nowhere. Actually, since I've been here, it's brought up 7 times. And each time, because somebody's got a friend that some of these things violate and they got weak knees. It's a real commitment on your part, and I can appreciate it because we have complaints all the time of how things are maintained in the city. Can't you do something? We can only work within the restraints of the law. And so having a different tool, of course, it will bring out those select few who like to use our zoning code and inspection department codes to fuel their neighborhood feuds. But we're used to that anyways. So do appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. And to that point, it will take some intestinal fortitude, if you will, to move that forward. And I think we've got a good plan. I think we've got a good methodology in place and a good review process to that. So I think that's good. That said, we're out of town. I do want to give 30 seconds before we switch over. I'll ask everybody to stay close because I would like to start right at 7 o'clock. For anybody that hasn't been able to, that wants to sign in to speak, the sheet is up here. With that, will I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr.
To
Sullivan?
adjourn?
Thank you. Any objection? Committee meeting adjourned. Stay close. Stay close. Looking at the crowd, I see
Disperse
I see another 30, 40-minute meeting. We could get back on the pace here, baby. Let's stay with that. Let's stay with that. My average is way inflated, so.